Welcome to Haunts Wargaming. I'm your host, Justin. In this video, we're going to be building some modern office buildings / warehouse buildings. Whatever you want to use them for, they're just a bunch of general purpose buildings. Longtime viewers will remember my ongoing factory build, which I haven't added to in quite a while. I've had a lot going on. I built these little add-on buildings for it, and I've actually ended up using those more than the main buildings. They're super useful, and I'd really like some more of them. So I wanted to build a few more of these buildings, and this time they're actually going to have doors and windows, if you can believe that. Yeah, we're really moving up in the world. That's how this project started, but with like most of my terrain projects, I was figuring it out along the way, and the project ended up getting way bigger than I originally planned. I started out with some scrap packaging styrofoam. I really hate throwing this stuff away, so I dipped into my styrofoam coffers and pulled out a few suitable pieces. With my terrain builds, I like to try and recycle things whenever possible, and I definitely accomplished that with this one. I got to work with my Olfa knife, just carving off pieces of styrofoam until I got the basic outline of a few buildings. I left the bottom of the buildings open. After getting the basic shape locked in, I filled each one with a whole bunch of plastic caps and whatnot. I layered some construction adhesive in between the handfuls of caps to keep things from jostling around, and also just to help reinforce the structure. I threw some pieces of scrap foam in there as well. If you're ever wondering what I do with my scrap foam, this is usually where it ends up. Once I felt like the buildings were packed enough and nothing was going to jostle around or cause the buildings to bulge, I glued some heavy-duty cardboard on the bottoms. Construction adhesive is pretty toxic, so I avoid touching it, and I usually wear a respirator if I'm going to be working with it for more than a few minutes. If I do have to touch it, then I'll throw on a pair of nylon gloves. Beware that construction adhesive needs to be able to breathe in order to fully cure, so I made sure to poke a few vent holes and not fully seal off the inner chambers of the buildings, and I let them cure in a well-ventilated area for about a day. This cardboard has an outer wrap. You want to make sure you peel anything like that off, otherwise it's going to be difficult to glue things to it. Next, I started adding a few doors. I'm going to be adding a few commercial garage doors and a few regular person doors. For the garage doors, I glued a bunch of popsicle sticks down to a piece of cardboard. I had picked out some spots in the styrofoam that were kind of inset a little bit that I thought would be a good spot to put like a larger commercial door or like a bay area, something like that. I didn't bother cutting the ends off the popsicle sticks because they'll be covered up later. I used construction adhesive for the one garage door and wood glue for the other. Either one works just fine as long as you weigh them down and you make sure that the sticks are nice and flush with each other. At this point I was doing a lot of prep work. I cut out some corner pieces for the buildings. For this I like to use the corners of cereal boxes. These are about a ½ inch long, about 1/4 of an inch from the seam on both sides. I also flattened some air dry clay and made some brick walls with my 3D printed texture roller. These files are free. I'll link to them below if you want to check them out. Here you can see I'm building out the frame for one of the garage doors, just using some popsicle sticks once again for this, and a little bit of scrap foam as filler. My original plan for most of the walls was to use corrugated paper. I took a bunch of corrugated sheets outside and spray painted them ahead of time, just to get a base color down and strengthen the paper up a little bit. If you aren't aware, corrugated paper is made from 2 pieces of paper, one flat one and one with the corrugation, and they're just glued together. What I didn't anticipate was how easily those would start to come apart when you glue large pieces of it down. I think it was due to either moisture or possibly the fumes from the construction adhesive. Quite a few of those corrugated sheets were starting to peel apart, so I ended up having to peel a few of them off and re-glue them. To apply the clay bricks, just trim them down. It's important to have an idea of how much you'll need ahead of time. Getting nice straight lines of bricks as you're rolling them out is important too. I found that it helps to focus on one line of bricks while rolling them out and just apply even pressure. It's not rocket science, but it might take a few tries to get it right. If I don't have enough bricks to finish a spot, I piece them together like this to make it look like there's a crack in the wall. Alright, so I got most of the walls on at this point. build out a garage door here and then a normal door. I'm gonna go through, and if I wanna put any windows in, I'll do that all in one go. But right now I'm just trying to get most of the exterior finished so it doesn't just look like a bunch of styrofoam. I'm thinking that there's going to be like an entranceway here. I got both of these covered on the exterior, excluding this part here. I don't think this is tall enough to make it another floor, so I think it's just going to maybe be an extension of the first floor. I got two of those to work with, and then I got this smaller building. That one's actually a little bit shorter. This edge isn't perfectly square. I'm just going to roll with it, and hopefully it won't be too noticeable. So I'm printing out these HVAC parts. I got a set of these, and I'll link to that. I'll talk about it a little bit more later, I'm sure. Really excited to add these to the roof. I think it's going to add a lot to this set. This project's already way bigger than I was originally planning. I might just take this one out. So yeah, I'm just going to finish up these exteriors. Once again, I used heavy-duty cardboard to finish off the roofs, cutting pieces that would sit flush with the corrugated walls, and I also used some foam board to add some slightly raised portions to some of the roofs. I cut some strips of foam board to wrap around the edges of some of the roofs. To smooth out the foam edges and fill any gaps, I used construction adhesive. I used a stir stick to smooth it out. Maybe not the ideal tool, but it works. I wanted to try making some gravel roofs, which are common on flat buildings like these. Gravel is often used to give roofs protection from the elements and help weigh down the underlying materials. In our case, it's going to help give these roofs some visual interest. To do that, I just spread out a thin layer of wood glue using a makeshift squeegee, doing my best to avoid getting any glue on the raised parts, and then I just spread some fine sand on top of that. I'm applying the corner pieces here. I just use hot glue for this and cut the ends off with a scissors. For this building, I used some heavy-duty cardboard instead of foam board, and I used some cereal box cardboard for the moldings. This takes a little bit longer, but it works just as well. By the way, I'll have links to all the products used in the description below as always. I get affiliate income from those links at no extra cost to you. If you use those links, I appreciate it. Ad revenue can be pretty dismal, and it's been kind of tough to find sponsors for these videos, so every little bit helps. I made the regular people doors an inch wide and an inch and 7/8 tall. To me, that's big enough to look decent at 28 or 32 millimeter scale. I try to build my terrain so it looks okay with both. Here I'm building out one of the doorways. I was using some sticks to fill the space, but I decided that the door wasn't sunk in as much as I would like, so I took a few of them back out, and I threw a few sticks in there to hold everything together while it cured. I also added a little resin dot handle. And here I'm adding some more trim around the garage door and smoothing out those concrete pads a little bit with some construction adhesive. At this point, I was really starting to hate the initial colors that I chose for my base coats, so I just painted everything a nice dark millennial gray. I didn't film it, but you can probably tell that I coated this cardboard with wood glue. That gave the cardboard a nice smooth surface, and it helps to seal in any of those small gaps. With the base coat done, I went in with a lighter gray on the corrugated sections. I decided to make some tinted glass windows, and they took a few attempts to get right. I took a scrap piece of cereal box cardboard and painted it black. Then I layered glossy Mod Podge on top of that and laid out some simple 3D printed window frames over top of that. On my first attempt, I didn't spread the Mod Podge out enough and it ended up looking really wavy. On my second attempt, I used less Mod Podge and brushed it lightly to get a flat coat. I also tried to squeegee it on, and that gave similar results. Since Mod Podge is a glue, I just laid the frames out on top of it while it was still wet and just weighed them down. One of the issues was that due to the type of resin that I used, the frames were warping pretty badly, but it is a flexible resin, so as long as they were glued down well, they stayed in place. I tried using my FDM printer for these, and that wasn't really working out well either because there's just not that much contact with the plate, and that was causing a lot of issues. So yeah, I opted for resin. The Mod Podge didn't really do an amazing job here as a glue, so I ended up using super glue to reinforce most of these frames. I think if I do this in the future, I'm just going to skip the Mod Podge altogether. I'll just glue the frames down and then just spray it with gloss varnish. However you make these, once they're dry, you can just cut them out, trace out a spot where you want them with a hobby knife, peel off the corrugated cardboard, and glue them in place. I didn't inset most of the doors, opting to glue them directly to the wall instead with a basic frame. To finish the undersides of the buildings, I filled in any gaps with construction adhesive. Once that was dry, I just painted the bottoms black. I wanted some concrete pads for the doors and the garage doors, and I wanted them to kind of be rounded off a little bit. I decided to use some air dry clay for that and just sculpt some little raised pads. Epoxy putty would have been better for this, but I didn't have any on hand, so I just used my air dry clay. The HVAC set comes with some vent ends. I glued a few of those on where I thought it kind of made sense for a vent to be. For those gravel roofs, I tried a few different colors, and I ended up using a brownish gray concrete color. I wasn't quite happy with the glossiness on some of the windows, so I ended up using this piece of cardboard with some cutouts to block off each window and spray them with a glossy clear coat. Once again, you could just do this and skip the Mod Podge altogether. At this point, everything, of course, got a dark brown wash. And next I gave everything a millennial gray dry brushing, which I thought I went a little overboard with. So I went back in with this huge painter's brush, which is great for stippling, and just stippled some of that original dark gray back on the roofs, moldings, doors, and window frames. On to the star of the show, this HVAC set that I printed out. These are so cool. I don't know why I like them so much. My original idea was to use them as a semi-modular set of cover terrain. So like depending on how you have your building set up on the map, you can kind of rearrange them to make little barriers on the roofs. I mounted them on some foam board platforms. You could also use some matchsticks to raise them up a little bit, which I did do for one of my HVAC units. I just wanted them to be raised a little bit off the roof like they would be on a real building, so I glued together a few pieces and base coated them black. Then I gave them a generous dry brushing with some metallic paint. And a quick wash. I like to use pre-made washes for small stuff like this. And as much as I tried, I just couldn't resist the allure of adding some rust to these buildings. This is Vallejo New Rust mixed with matte Mod Podge, and it's not going to be nearly this vibrant once it dries. I found that a 2-to-1 ratio of Mod Podge to pigment works fairly well. If there's too much Mod Podge, then it's going to start to get like an eggshell look to it, which you don't want. Obviously, you want it to be super matte, but you also want it to be locked in place. It really helps to have a reference picture for this if you aren't confident with your abilities to decide where to apply the rust. Just look at some old buildings. And that's how I made these office buildings. I think they'll fit pretty well in with a lot of settings, modern and sci-fi. Hopefully this inspires you to make some buildings of your own. Thanks for watching. Shout out to my patrons for supporting this channel. Patrons can watch my videos ad-free. You also get access to our Discord server and any project add-ons or templates that I create. That's it for now. I hope you have a good day, and I will see you later.